Hello, and welcome to our Prairie-HR-Solutions channel, where we believe that knowledge should be shared and in empowering organizations and HR professionals to truly rethink how we are delivering the people solutions by using tools that we already have at our disposal. My name is Jay Finger, Principal HR Consultant here at Prairie-HR-Solutions. If you enjoy our informational video, please hit that subscribe button and we can continue to bring such videos to assist you in your HR endeavors. In this video series, I would like to attempt to help some of our fellow HR professionals that are consumed by living in the spreadsheet world with automating and opening their eyes up to something that will make your life so much easier. Now, there are many software suites in use in today's business world, from Microsoft Office to Google Workspace to many, many others. I want to focus on Google Workspace because many small to medium businesses utilize it. There are free versions, and even large public sectors at the state level and federal level use Google Suite, which is now referred to as Google Workspace. What I appreciate about Google Workspace is that it is web based, and if you do anything inside Google with any Google product or the web, you can automate it with Google Apps Script. Now, I know I said script. Please don't get scared and shut this video off, but it does require coding in Google Apps Script. But that is what this series is designed to do: teach you step by step on how to use Google Apps Script for HR purposes that will make your life so much easier. I'll try to avoid using jargon and keep it as informal and direct and as simple as possible. And I'll also provide you with the codes for each episode for use in your own HR world. Whether you are a large HR team, a team of one, or anyone else looking to make their life easier, I am hoping this video series can help. First, let's start off with what Google is. For those who don't use Google in your regular HR work, Google is the alternative to Microsoft Office, except it is built around the internet and the cloud, and that's what makes Google Apps Script so handy in HR. Now, I am by no means promoting one platform over the other. I have used both Google and Microsoft in my HR career, but I really learned Google Apps Script while serving as a senior leader in the public sector. While there, and along with many other companies, the majority of the resources went to the business units, and rightfully so, mind you. It just didn't leave very much for the HR function to come along and be where it needed to be. So I decided to close that gap by learning to use our Google Workspace in a different way and learn how to code in Google Apps Script so I can automate the manual processes that myself and my HR team were having to do through all the Google products we were using. I learned that no matter what you are doing with or in Google, whether it be in a sheet, slide, document, site, or even Gmail and Forms, you can write a script to have it do exactly what it is that you are doing. That's what makes Google Apps Script so handy. What I want to do is introduce Google Apps Script for HR by first showing you how it interacts with a spreadsheet. Now, we in HR tend to use spreadsheets quite a bit. So let's open up a blank spreadsheet here. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is give it a title. So let's title this spreadsheet Learning Google Apps Script. That's how you abbreviate Google Apps Script in HR. Each tool in Google, whether it be Sheet or a document, Gmail or whatever, has the ability to interact with and connect with Google Apps Script. Now, to get to Google Apps Script, we go up to our top menu and open this extensions option right here. Now, this will open up your add-on sub menu, and you should see App Script. It's this one here with little colorful xylophone keys, I suppose. So what we want to do is we want to click on that. If you don't see that, please let me know. You can send me a private email or chat or whatnot, and we can troubleshoot that and walk through it. But what we want to do is click on this, and what that'll do is that will open up our Google Apps Script page here. Now, I'm not going to go through the navigation of this page. If you want to learn what all these icons and things do here, Google does have a very good tutorial on that. So if you're interested, please look up that way. So while we're on this screen, what we want to do is give our app script page here, or file, a title. Now, since this script is bound to the sheet, I prefer to use the same exact title as the sheet that it's attached to. So our sheet is called Learning Google Apps Script for HR. So I'll name it that. Now, a script can be either bound or standalone. What bound means is that it is attached to whatever Google product it was used to open it. So in this case, it is with a sheet. So if you share this sheet or transfer ownership or delete the sheet, the Google Apps Script file goes with it. If it's a standalone, then it is its own entity and it interacts with whatever you're wanting it to interact with, whether it be a sheet or a document, from afar. It's not embedded, so to speak, inside a single product. So Google Apps Script, being that it's cloud-based and web browser-based, it's highly similar to JavaScript. So if you know JavaScript or encounter JavaScript in the future, it will be familiar. You'll notice that Google gives us a starter function, and it's called my function. It will always be called my function. You'll notice something about how my function is written. It's not written the way that we would typically write my function. The first letter of the first word is lowercase, and then the first letter of the second word is uppercase. This is called camel case, and camel case is a syntax designed to assist in the readability, but it's also a standard syntax within Google Apps Script and JavaScript. Certain words are reserved for use inside these coding languages, and those words that are reserved are typically capitalized letter for the first word. So if we were to just change this to capital M, you notice that the line changed to pink, and what it's saying is that this word, should it exist, or this function title, is reserved for Google Apps Script. So you always want to start off with lowercase. Notice that there's no spaces, so you wanted to make it one space. And we'll get into camel case a little bit later. So what a function is, let's talk about what a function actually is. It is essentially a set of instructions, and in our case, it's going to be telling a Google product, such as this sheet, to do something. Now, you're already familiar with functions, believe it or not. So let's go back to our sheet, and let's pick a cell, and let's type in equals. So say we want to sum two cell numbers. Say we want to add 5 and 6. And this is 5 and this is 6. So to do this, we would do equal sum this, voila, this, and boom, there we go. Now it gave us the result of whatever it was that we were trying to do, in this case, addition. So if you look up here, this equal sign is declaring a function, and that function is called sum. And then this piece right here is the parameters that we're passing to that. The parameters are what we're sending to the function to do something with. So when we go back to our script page here, our script files webpage, you'll notice that we have a function. This can be thought of as that equal sign. And then we have the name. So in our previous example there, that was called sum. And then the parentheses, if you remember right, I believe it was, don't quote me on this, I believe it was C6 and D6 maybe. These are the parameters. In this case, it would be comma. But the point that I'm trying to drill into is we're already using our functions. We just haven't realized that they were functions. In HR, though, there are times that we are going to run some pretty interesting functions, spreadsheet functions that may or may not exist. And then we're trying to think of creative ways to use the functions that are available to us through that sheet to get to what it is that we want. There are also times that, say, we're using logical, those if this, then that. Sometimes that logic can get pretty complex if we're having to do if this, but not this, then do this. That set of instructions, when we carry it out to get to our end result, can become incredibly cumbersome. And then there's also the chance that when we share our sheet, people will inadvertently or directly go in and change that function, and then the functionality just won't seem to work. Now, in my case, I have had instances to where I've locked down functions, and somehow, some way, people will still change the darn things, and my sheet will just lose all functionality. With Google Apps Script, everything is happening on the back end outside of you, so you never run into somebody going in and accidentally changing a function. So to illustrate how Google Apps Script works, let's go back to our spreadsheet. What we'll do is we will get rid of all this. And let's say we have a very, very simple employee database. What we'll do is we'll just give it 3 columns here. We'll do name, job, title, and salary. We'll populate some real quick data here. We'll go Ann, she's a developer, she makes $98K a year. And then we'll do Joe, who is our accountant. We pay our accountant $78,000. And then we'll do Pat. Pat is our trusty HR generalist, that the glue that holds everything together. And Pat makes 85. So here we go. So now we have a very simple HR employee database. And what we want to do is we want to take all the information in these cells in this database, so to speak, and send it to our Google Apps Script on the back end outside of you to store and then do something with at a later time, and do many different things at a later time. So now let's go back to our Google Apps Script page here, and let's start creating our function. Now, the first thing we want to do is change this generic name, this my function name, to something that is meaningful. When we create functions, we always want to make sure that the function name actually describes what the function does. And it can really be anything we want. Within the restrictions, of course, it has to start off with a lowercase letter, and it cannot be a number. It's got to start off with a letter. But we want it to be descriptive of what it does. So say we were coding quite a bit of things, and that consisted of a lot of functions. And all of our functions were just some willy-nilly names like my function, Joe's function, Anna's function, or whatever. And we're trying to look through all these functions because we need to make a change. Now, we're going to have to remember what each function did based on its arbitrary name. It can get very confusing, and it can be just a time sink to go through and figure out what each function does. Instead, we can just name the function what it does and go right to it. So in our case, we are trying to get information from a sheet and dump it into our Google Apps Script here. So we can name this get sheet data. Now, each function is going to have the parentheses here. In our case, we're not going to put anything into this because we don't have anything yet. We're not sending anything from another function to this function here. So we just leave this blank. You'll also notice that we have curly brackets. Now, these curly brackets can be thought of as bookends or starting and stopping points. The first one starts the function, And this last one here tells Google Apps Script that the function is done. Nothing else follows. Everything in between these curly brackets are the sets of instructions that tell the script what it is that it needs to do. So I want to pause here because we're going to get into something called variables, and I'd like to talk about variables before we go on. Since we are giving Google a set of instructions step by step, those instructions would have to be repeated every single time we did something. And this can obviously become very cumbersome. This is where our variables come in. A variable stores a set of instructions into whatever we name it. This way, instead of having to write out the whole instruction every time we want to reference that step, we can just type the variable name that we stored it under. So we declare variables a few different ways, which I'll get into a little bit later in some future videos. But right now, let's just declare our variable using let. And then we got to give our variable a name. Since we have to start off at the very beginning, very basic level for Google Apps Script, we have to tell Google Apps Script first what application in Google we are using. In this case, we're using a spreadsheet. So let's just call this SS for spreadsheet. So let's SS, which is spreadsheet, equal to, since we're having to tell Google first what application we're using, we can start typing spreadsheet. You'll notice that in this case, I use the uppercase because it's a built-in reserved, in this case, class that Google uses. You would still populate the hint bar if you used the lowercase, but once you selected it, it would automatically change it to uppercase, and it would be this nice pink color. So as we're writing lines of instructions, we separate ideas and concepts by periods. So right here, we are telling Google that we are using our spreadsheet application. And then we want to go to a next thought, which is a period. And in that Google spreadsheet application, we want to get our active spreadsheet. That is the spreadsheet that this script is bound to. So let's start by typing in get, and you'll see that it's populating a whole bunch of options here. Before we go on, I want to do some terminology clarification here. So when we're thinking of sheets and spreadsheets and workbooks and all that, a lot of times in our professional careers, we use these terms interchangeably. With Google Apps Script, a spreadsheet is a lot like a workbook. Let's go back to our spreadsheet here. It is all this information, all this data, to include all the data found in all the tabs that we have. Now, a sheet is each individual tab. So now that we have the terminology down, what we want to do is we want to get not the active sheet, because we got to get the active spreadsheet first in order to drill down to the sheet. So we want our active spreadsheet. Now you'll notice in our little tooltip drop down population thing here that we have method in parentheses. What that is saying is that get active spreadsheet is a method which will require us to also have parentheses at the end of it. So we will need the parentheses. Nothing's going to go in here because we don't have anything to go inside the parentheses. We could keep going, drilling further down to get our sheet. So we can go and get sheet. But I prefer to keep the spreadsheet that I'm working with in its own variable, just in case I need to go back at a later time or do something different with that spreadsheet. It's easier to have it in its own separate variable. And we'll see that when we get in our future videos. We end each line of instructions in Google Apps Script with a semicolon. What that semicolon does is tell Google Apps Script, okay, this instruction is done. I can close it out. Nothing's going to follow as it pertains to our variable name here, SS. So now that we have our spreadsheet saved in this SS variable, let's go down and get our individual sheet. So we'll start with let again to declare the variable. This time, let's just make it pretty descriptive and go sheet. Again, you can use whatever terminology you want. Now, instead of having to type all of this over again, we already saved it in a variable. So we can actually use that variable name and then continue on with the instructions, period. Now we want to get our sheet. Now we could get active sheet. The problem with get active sheet is if you have more than one sheet and you're doing something with that sheet, the active sheet is going to change. So instead, what I like to do is get sheet by name. Now you'll notice that get sheet by name is similar to get sheet name. So get sheet name simply tells Google Apps Script to go and get whatever the tab's name is. We don't want that. We want to get the whole sheet because we know what the tab's name is. So what we want is to get the sheet by the name. And you'll notice that this is a method, so it's going to need the parentheses. So what it's wanting inside this parentheses is, in order to get the sheet by the name, it needs to know the name of the sheet or that tab. And it needs this in a string format. Now, Google Apps Script and JavaScript, when we write a string or plain text or plain text, it needs to be enveloped or wrapped inside quotation marks. Now, you can use double quotes or single quotes. It just needs to be consistent. So you can't start it with a double quote and end it with a single quote. It's got to have consistent. So let's do double quotes. Now, what we're going to need in here is the name of our sheet or our tab here. Now, default, each tab has like sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3. I prefer to rename them a little bit more descriptive into what they actually are. So this one we're going to call employee data. Now, when we're thinking of strings in Google Apps Script, strings, it will not do spelling check for you. It will not assume that you have a space or don't have a space. It needs to be exactly identical, uppercase, lowercase, spaces, everything, the way it is written inside this tab. So keep that in mind when we do employee data. We'll go back in here. What we want to do is we want to put employee data, the string employee data in here exactly as it's written. And then again, I like to store that in its own variable. So I'll end that set of instructions. And then let's pause here so we can show exactly what is occurring. So in our function, this get sheet data, what we're asking Google Apps Script to do is to create a variable called SS. And in that variable, we want to declare that we are using the spreadsheet Google application, so Google Sheets, and we want to get the active spreadsheet. The active spreadsheet is the spreadsheet that is bound to this function. And with this variable SS, we want to create another variable called sheet that uses the SS variable and drills down, gets a sheet by the name or the tab called employee data. So right now, what we did is we just oriented our Google Apps Script's focus to that sheet that we were on. It hasn't done anything with it yet. It's just saying, okay, I am looking right at it. So what we want to do is we want to get all of this data and send it back to our Google Apps Script to do something with. So in order to do that, we have to tell Google Apps Script what cells our data exists in. So the way Google Apps Script reads cells is it reads by row first, then column. So if we wanted to get, say, 78,000, we would need to be row 3 and column C, or 1, 1, 2, 3. So 78,000 is row 3, column 3. Now, Google Apps Script, the reason why I'm doing it in numbers is once we start getting that, the hint bar will show you that it needs to be in a number format or an integer. For Ann, it would be row 2, column 1. So to initially grab our data, let's just grab this name right here, Ann, just to show what's actually occurring. So what we want to do is create another variable. Let's do employee data. So let employee data, again, you'll see on that I'm using camel case. And how we're going to get our employee data is we need to reference this variable, so sheet dot. And what we're wanting to do is get those cells. We want to get that individual cell. Now, a cell inside a sheet is called a range. So we can just use Google's intuition to start typing what it is that we want to do. So we want to get range, and here we go. You'll see get range pops up, and that's exactly what it is that we want. And we notice it's a method, which means that it's going to take the parentheses. It's required to get the parentheses. So once we start typing the parentheses, it'll tell us what needs to go inside those parentheses. And if you're not seeing the pop-up, I apologize. You should be seeing it on yours if you're going. But what we are required to put inside these parentheses here is a row in an integer format, a comma, and then the column in an integer format. So if we remember, Ann was at row 2, then we need a column, and then, or a comma, excuse me, and then the column was column 1. So we'll go back here and show you where I'm getting this from. So Ann is row 2, column 1. And now what we want to do with that, because right now, if we just leave it, if we just end this here, all Google's doing is saying, okay, cool, I'm looking at that cell. Great, now what? What we want really is the value of that cell. So we can continue on this line of instructions here and type in get value, because each cell is a value. You'll see that you have two different options. One is get, let me share the right tab here. Apologize about that. What we want to do is get the value of this cell. So get value. Now you'll have two ways to get value. You'll have get value and get values. So since we only have one cell, singular, we want to get the value of that cell. If we had multiple cells, which we will in our next video, we'll use the get values. But for now, we just want to use the get value, get one of them. And it's a method, so we don't need to, or we need the parentheses. Nothing needs to go in the parentheses. And then we can end it with a semicolon. So what we did here was we took our sheet variable, which stores all the information that we have above it and that we're referencing. And then we use the sheet data to get the range of the cell at row 2, column 1, and we're wanting to get the value of that cell. And then we're storing it in this employee data. Now we're not seeing that actual value yet because we haven't told Google Apps Script that we want to see it. Now, what we can do is we can log this out. And what logging will do is it'll show us on this page the value of what that variable is. So to do that, we do capital L, logger, period, log. Now, log is a method, so we're going to need parentheses because we need to put something in the parentheses. And the thing that we're putting in the parentheses isn't necessarily plain text. It could be plain text. We could use a string, and then it'll just show the string directly, which I can show you. But really what we're wanting is the value of this stored variable. So what we do is we type that name of that variable exactly as it is inside those parentheses, and then we'll end it with a semicolon. So now, if we did this correctly, what will happen is when we run this, it will pop up the value of employee data from our sheet. First, we need to save our data. So you'll notice that this circle over here, this off yellow circle, anytime that you see that, that means that you have code that is unsaved. So what we want to do is go up here and save the project. And you'll notice that when we save it, we'll have run, debug, and our function will be available here in this dropdown. Those are now selectable. When we run a Google Apps script for the very first time, we will more than likely have to authorize that. Now, what I mean by authorizing is we need to share the Google Sheet or Doc, whatever it is, with the Google Apps script that it's bound to. So let's go ahead and click Run. It'll start executing. You'll see authorization is required. So we have to give our script authorization for our sheet. Now, as we go through this, Google is very good about managing its own liability. So it's going to throw quite a bit of scary terms at you saying, oh, it's unsafe. We didn't do it. We don't have anything to do with this script. Don't use it. We're not held responsible, which is fine because we're the ones creating the script. We trust ourselves. So we need to review the permissions. So how we review our permissions, first it'll tell us to choose an account. In our case, we want to sign into our account. And then it'll show us this screen, which states that Google hasn't verified this app. Google didn't create the app. We don't plan on sharing this application or this app script file with Google to put on the Play Store or anything like that. So that's fine. If you press go back to safety, you're not going to be able to run the script. It's just going to close this box and you won't be able to do anything further other than create the script. You'll still, in order to use the script, you'll have to go through and allow it. So to allow it, what we do is we go over here to advanced, and then we click on advanced, and then it'll give you a secondary warning saying continue only if you understand the risks and trust the developer. And we're the developer in this case. We trust ourselves. So you want to hit go to the script name file. Once we click on that, it'll open up this last thing and saying this will allow Google, our file, to see, edit, create, and delete all of your Google sheets and spreadsheets. It's not going to do it to all of it. It is only bound to one sheet. So it can only touch the one thing that we're allowing it to, and that is the sheet, and do only what it is that we're telling it to do. It will never create its own script. So we want to allow, and then when we click allow, what happens is it closes that piece and it runs the script. So as you can see, it's in this execution log here. It started the execution, which is this curly bracket. Then it ran all the stuff inside our function. Since we told it to log the employee data variable, it showed us what that variable value is, which is and then it closed the function, which is our closing curly bracket. So good. So it worked just as we intended. To illustrate how it picks up things, say this cell actually was, let's do Joe. We'll go back here and we will run it. We already authorized it, so we don't have to go through that again. So if we run it again, it'll pull the value of that cell every single time it runs. So if that cell value changes and you run the function again, it will pull up whatever it changed to. And what we can also do here is change the cell that we're referencing. So this is row 2, column 1. Say we want the title of Joan, which is row 2, column 2, and then we run it. And what it'll do is it'll pull up that appropriate cell value. So I'm going to end here because I want this to be digestible. And in the next episode, what we will do is we will get that whole block of data and then start doing things with it. We'll start changing values of those cells on the back end without having to go into our sheet. So again, if you like what we're doing, please hit that subscribe button so we can continue to bring you these videos. And I hope this video episode was beneficial and enlightening, and I hope to see you in the next video. Until then, take care.